Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to really unpack complex ideas and give you practical insights you can use. Today we're tackling a book that's caused quite a stir, especially in Asia, called The Courage to be Disliked.
That's right. And it's essentially a very accessible gateway into the philosophy of Alfred Adler. Now, Adler, he's often mentioned alongside Freud and Jung as, one of the big three in 19th century psychology.
But his ideas feel quite different, don't they? Less focused on the deep past, perhaps.
Exactly. He is often less known in popular culture, but his approach is, I'd say, remarkably direct. It offers a kind of actionable roadmap to happiness that doesn't get bogged down in the way Freudian analysis sometimes can.
So if we had to boil the book down to one sentence, what's the core shift it's asking us to make?
Okay, one sentence. I'd say it's about moving away from constantly seeking approval and comparing yourself to others.
Which feels like the default mode for many of us.
It absolutely does. And shifting towards separating what's your responsibility versus others, making choices based on the present moment, and finding your value in how you contribute to your community, broadly speaking.
Okay, that sounds potentially life-changing. So for you listening, why should you stick with us for this? What's the payoff?
Well, the promise here isn't just intellectual understanding. The Adlerian ideas in this book offer really practical methods. We're talking about things that can genuinely lower that day-to-day interpersonal anxiety.
The constant worry about what others think.
Precisely. And also increase your speed and conviction when making decisions, and ultimately give you a much stronger sense of control over your own life story. Less being tossed around by circumstances, more steering the ship.
All right, let's dive in. The foundation seems to be this radical rejection of determinism, the idea that our past dictates our present.
Yes, that's the absolute starting point. And this is where we had our first key Adlerian concept, the distinction between etiology and teleology.
Okay, technical terms. Break those down for us. Etiology first.
Etiology is probably what most people are familiar with, maybe through Freud or just general cultural understanding. It's the study of causation. It basically says your present state, your unhappiness, your neuroses, your behaviors is caused by past events.
Right. Like I have trouble trusting people because I was betrayed in a past relationship. The past event is the direct cause.
Exactly. It leads to a deterministic view. Your past locks you into a certain present or future, but Adler flips this completely with teleology. Teleology is the study of purpose. It argues that your actions, your feelings, even your unhappiness aren't dictated by past causes, but are driven by a goal you are aiming for right now in this present moment.
Okay, hold on. This is where it gets challenging because the book and Adler famously seem to downplay trauma. It says we don't suffer from the shock of past experiences, but we make something out of them to suit our current purpose. How does that account for really severe trauma or, say, clinical depression? It sounds a bit like victim blaming.
That's a really important point, and it's often misunderstood. Adler isn't denying the pain or the reality of past events, not at all. What he's denying is their power to determine your present and future, absolutely.
So the event happened, the pain was real.
Yeah.
But its meaning or its effect now is something I'm choosing.
In a sense, yes. The past event provides the, let's say, raw material. But you, in the present, are the one crafting it into your current lifestyle, your way of seeing the world and your place in it. You might be using the memory of that trauma, perhaps unconsciously, to support a current goal.
What kind of goal could possibly be served by holding on to trauma?
Well, maybe the goal is I don't have to engage with the difficult task of trying to build relationships, or I have a justification for not striving for happiness because the world is inherently unsafe. It's a way to avoid the perceived risk or effort of changing. You're not broken by the trauma. You're using the trauma to maintain a certain stance towards life now.
Okay, that's a huge reframe. Let's make it concrete with the anger example from the book. The waiter spills coffee on you. Etiology says the spill causes the anger.
Right. An external event triggers an unavoidable internal reaction. But teleology says, no, you chose anger. You fabricated that emotion in that instant as a tool.
A tool for what?
Usually to achieve the immediate goal of asserting dominance, making the waiter submit, or controlling the situation quickly. Think about the mother in the book who's yelling furiously at her daughter.
And the phone rings, and instantly she's polite and calm talking to the caller.
Exactly. She put the anger tool down because it wasn't useful for the goal of having a polite phone conversation. Then, presumably, she picks it right back up after hanging up. That shows it's a choice, not an uncontrollable force.
Wow. Okay, so the immediate actionable step here is profound. When you feel that flush of anger or maybe intense frustration, pause for just a second and ask yourself, okay, what goal am I actually trying to achieve right now by deploying this emotion.
That pause, that moment of awareness is incredibly powerful. It introduces choice where previously there felt like none.
And this leads to the idea that if we choose our emotions, we also choose our overall lifestyle.
Yeah.
When you mentioned lifestyle earlier, Adler uses this term quite specifically, doesn't he? It's not about fancy cars or clothes.
Not at all. Lifestyle, in Adlerian terms, is your fundamental orientation towards the world. It's the whole web of beliefs and assumptions, often unconscious about yourself, about others, about life itself. It's the meaning you assign to everything.
So are you saying people choose to be unhappy? That my entire framework, if it leads to unhappiness, is something I've selected? That sounds quite harsh.
It can sound harsh initially, but Adler frames it as empowering. Yes, the theory is that people are unhappy because they, at some level, choose not to change their current lifestyle. And the reason, courage, or rather the lack of it. Change is scary. Stepping into a new way of being, a potentially happier way, involves facing the unknown, taking responsibility, maybe being misunderstood. It often feels safer, more familiar to stick with the current unhappiness, even if it's painful.
So my current struggles, my anxieties, they might be serving a purpose, a kind of convenience even, protecting me from something scarier.
That's the idea. Adler talks about the life lie, the excuses we build around our chosen lifestyle to avoid the anxiety of true freedom and the effort change requires. It's easier to say, I can't change because of X, than to say, I'm choosing not to change because I lack the courage right now.
Okay, that shifts the focus entirely. It's not about whether I can change, Adler insists we always can, at any moment. It's about whether I have the courage to make that choice, the courage to be happy.
Precisely. And the courage isn't needed in a vacuum. Adler is very clear. Where do most of our problems, our unhappiness, actually manifest?
And our dealings with other people.
Exactly. All problems are fundamentally interpersonal relationship problems. That's a cornerstone of Adlerian psychology. So if you want freedom and happiness, you have to tackle the anxieties rooted in your relationships.
Which brings us neatly to one of the most practical and honestly relieving concepts in the book, separation of tasks.
Yes. This one is huge for reducing daily friction. The core idea is that freedom comes from clearly recognizing and respecting the boundary between what is your task and what is someone else's task.
How do we draw that line?
Yeah.
It feels blurry sometimes, especially with people we care about.
Adler gives a very clear criterion. Ask this question. Who ultimately experiences the direct consequences of the choice or action? Whoever bears the final, unavoidable consequence, that's whose task it is.
Let's use the parenting example again. A teenager isn't studying. It drives the parent crazy. Whose task is the studying?
According to Adler, it's unequivocally the child's task. Why? Because the consequences, failing grades, limited future options, the disappointment of not learning fall directly on the child. The parent feels distress, yes, but the primary consequence isn't theirs.
So the parent's task isn't to make the child study.
No, that's interfering, intruding on the child's task. The parent's task might be to offer support, provide resources, share their own experiences or concerns, build a trusting relationship where the child might ask for help. But they shouldn't take over the child's responsibility.
That requires enormous restraint, especially when you see them heading towards a ditch. What about at work? I send a report to my boss, and I'm agonizing over whether they'll like it, whether they'll approve.
Okay, apply the rule. Your task was to research, write, and submit the best report you could given the constraints. That's done. Now, what your boss thinks of it, whether they approve it, how they feel about it, whose task is that?
The bosses. They bear the consequence of their judgment, their decision.
Exactly. Their reaction, their approval, their mood, that is their task to manage. It stems from their values, their pressures, their perspective. By worrying excessively about it, you're trying to control their task, which is impossible and just generates anxiety for you.
So, a practical step for listeners. If you're feeling anxious about an interpersonal situation, grab a piece of paper or a note app. Step 1, write down the specific problem.
Yeah.
Step 2, clearly identify the person who ultimately bears the consequence. Whose task is this, really?
A crucial step.
And step 3, list one concrete thing you will stop doing because it's interfering with their task. Maybe stop sending follow-up emails checking on their mood, or stop rehearsing justifications in your head for their potential reaction.
That's a fantastic, actionable summary. This task separation card idea is very practical.
Okay, separating tasks reduces friction. But Adler goes further, doesn't he? There's a cost to this freedom.
There is. And it leads to the second major concept, arguably the most confronting one, which gives the book its title. You must deny the desire for recognition. You need the courage to be disliked.
Why is seeking recognition so problematic? Isn't it natural to want people to like us, to approve of what we do?
It might feel natural, but Adler argues it's the path to enslavement. If your primary goal is to be liked or approved of, you end up constantly adjusting your behavior, your words, even your beliefs to meet other people's expectations.
You end up living their life, not your own.
Precisely. You become a weather vane, constantly trying to gauge which way the wind of their opinion is blowing. And crucially, what other people think of you, whether they like you, dislike you, praise you, criticize you, is fundamentally their task.
Connecting back to task separation. Their opinion is their consequence to bear, not mine to manage.
You have absolutely zero control over their feelings or judgments in the end. All you control is your own actions and choices, based on your own principles. So freedom means choosing the path you believe is best and walking it even if others disapprove, criticize, or plain dislike you for it. You can't let the fear of someone else's negative reaction dictate your life choices.
That takes real courage. Okay, moving inward now. How should we relate to ourselves in this framework? This brings us to self-acceptance versus self-affirmation.
Right. Many self-help approaches focus on self-affirmation, telling yourself, I am great, I'm successful, even if the evidence doesn't quite stack up. Adler sees this as potentially dishonest.
Like if I scored 60% on something, but I tell myself, I'm really a 100% person who just had bad luck.
Exactly. That's trying to inflate reality. Adler advocates for self-acceptance. Sometimes he uses the term affirmative resignation, which sounds a bit odd.
Yet resignation sounds like giving up. What does affirmative resignation really mean?
It means honestly acknowledging your current capabilities and limitations without despair. So accepting the 60% score as the current reality. Okay, right now in this area, I'm at a 60%. That's the fact. That's the acceptance, the resignation to reality.
And the affirmative part.
The affirmative part is focusing your energy and courage on what you can change, starting from that accepted 60% baseline. It's saying, okay, I'm 60% now. What steps can I take to get to 65% or 70%? It's about focusing on growth from where you actually are, not from some idealized fantasy. Nobody is 100% perfect.
So the actionable step here is pretty clear. Stop beating yourself up by comparing yourself to some impossible ideal.
Yes. Instead of seeing yourself as a flawed 100% person and constantly subtracting points, view yourself as starting from, say, 0. Be grateful for what you can do for your current level of being and focus on incremental progress. Accept your incapable self right now and work from there.
Okay, that's self-you. Now, back to relationships. If we're separating tasks and not seeking recognition, how do we build healthy connections? This involves moving from vertical to horizontal relationships, right?
Absolutely. This is about encouragement versus praise rebuke. Adler saw typical relationships, especially parent-child or manager-employee, as often being vertical relationships based on hierarchy. Praise and rebuke are the tools of these vertical relationships.
Well, rebuke I understand as being vertical, like scolding someone from a position of authority. But praise feels positive, encouraging. Why is it vertical?
This is another quite radical point. Adler viewed praise as a subtle form of manipulation and judgment. He literally described it as judgment passed by a person of ability onto a person of no ability.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
It is. When you praise someone, good job, you're so smart, you are implicitly placing yourself above them in a position to judge their performance or worth. You praise your child for cleaning their room, but you likely wouldn't praise your partner in the same way for doing the dishes, right? Because praising an equal feels condescending.
That's true. It implies a power imbalance. So even positive judgment reinforces a hierarchy.
That's the argument. Instead, Adler champions encouragement, which happens in horizontal relationships between equals. Encouragement isn't about judging the outcome. It's about acknowledging effort, expressing gratitude, or simply noticing contributions.
So instead of great presentation,
Yeah.
which is a judgment.
You might say, thank you, that presentation was really helpful, I learned a lot, which expresses gratitude. Or, I saw how much time you put into gathering that data, thank you, which acknowledges effort and expresses appreciation. It focuses on contribution and collaboration, not top-down assessment.
This leads to another actionable tool, maybe an encouragement talk card. When you want to give feedback, consciously try to replace evaluative praise or criticism with expressions of gratitude or observations about the process or effort.
Exactly. That was a big help, thanks. I appreciate you sharing that information. I noticed you stayed late to finish that. It builds connection without reinforcing hierarchy.
Okay, so we've separated tasks, stopped chasing approval, accepted ourselves, and moved towards encouragement in horizontal relationships. Where does this all lead? What is happiness in the Adlerian view?
It's beautifully simple and profound. Happiness is the feeling of contribution. It's the subjective sense deep down that I am beneficial to the community or I am useful to someone.
And community can be big or small, like family, work team, society.
Any community you feel part of. And critically, this feeling of contribution is subjective. You don't need external validation or praise from others to feel it. If you genuinely feel you've contributed, that provides a deep sense of your own worth.
That's empowering because it puts happiness within our control, regardless of how others react. So how do we cultivate that feeling, especially if we're used to looking for external pats on the back?
This is where another practical tool comes in, like a contribution log card. At the end of each day, take just a minute to note down maybe 3 small micro contributions you made.
Micro contributions like what?
It could be anything. Sharing useful information with a colleague, listening patiently to a friend, offering emotional support, doing your chores cheerfully at home, holding a door open, anything where you feel you added even a tiny bit of value to the collective, however small.
And just the act of noticing and logging these reinforces that subjective feeling of worth.
Precisely. It trains your brain to recognize your own value through contribution, independent of external rewards, and this feeling becomes your internal compass. Adler talks about needing a guiding star to navigate life freely, especially when you have the courage to be disliked.
And that guiding star is
contribution to others. As long as you maintain that consciousness, I am contributing, I am useful, you won't get lost. You can live freely, make your choices based on your principles, and not be overly swayed by whether people approve or disapprove, because your sense of worth comes from within, from that feeling of contribution.
It sounds like it grounds you. And this ties into how Adler viewed life itself, doesn't it? Not as a race to a finish line.
Exactly. He contrasted the kinetic life lived as if climbing a mountain, only focused on reaching the summit, with the energial life.
Energial.
Think of it like dancing. When you dance, the purpose isn't to arrive at a specific spot on the floor. The purpose is the dancing itself, moment by moment. Life, for Adler, should be like that dance. Live earnestly in the here and now. Focus on making contributions now, separating tasks now, being courageous now.
And if you live each moment well, like dancing well,
you find that you have, in effect, arrived at fulfillment all along the way. You don't need a rigid, linear plan stretching years into the future. Fulfillment is found in the process, in the present engagement with life's tasks.
Okay, that's a really compelling framework. Before we wrap up, let's quickly tackle a few common misconceptions or criticisms. This philosophy, especially the courage to be disliked part, can sound quite harsh, maybe even antisocial or nihilistic.
That's a common misunderstanding. It's crucial to clarify. Adler isn't advocating for becoming a hermit or deliberately alienating everyone. The goal isn't to be disliked, but to not be controlled by the fear of being disliked.
So it's not about rejecting all expectations, but maybe rejecting unreasonable expectations or expectations that compromise your own tasks and principles.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean abandoning relationships. In fact, Adlerian psychology puts relationships at the center. But it argues for relationships built on mutual respect, clear boundaries, task separation, and contribution horizontal relationships. Long-term relationships absolutely require negotiation, compromise, and connection, not just assertion of individual freedom.
What about the trauma point again? Is Adler really saying severe past trauma doesn't matter? Because that feels dismissive for people who've genuinely suffered.
Again, it's nuance. He's not denying the suffering or the impact. He's denying that the past event has absolute deterministic power over your present choices and future potential. The emphasis is always on your present agency, what you can do now, how you can reinterpret the past to serve a more constructive present goal. Of course, for severe trauma, professional therapeutic help is essential, and Adlerian psychology can be part of that, but it doesn't negate the need for specific trauma-focused care.
And finally, not caring about evaluation. Does that mean you just ignore feedback and become completely self-absorbed?
Not at all. It means not letting your core sense of self-worth and your fundamental life choices be dictated by external evaluation. You can still listen to feedback, learn from criticism, and cooperate effectively with others. The aim is freedom from the tyranny of seeking approval, not freedom from interacting respectfully and constructively with the community. Your worth comes from contribution, which requires interaction.
Okay, that clears things up significantly. It's challenging philosophy, but deeply empowering if you embrace it. So the final provocative thought for everyone listening seems to be this. The world, or at least your world, can only change if you change first. Are you ready to take that first step? To practice freedom, even knowing it might mean facing disapproval. Accepting the possibility, maybe the inevitability of being disliked for your authentic choices.
And the way to start isn't some grand gesture. It's small, concrete actions. Choose just one concept we've talked about today. Maybe it's teleology. Next time you feel a strong negative emotion, ask, what's my goal here?
Or separation of tasks. Identify one thing you're worrying about that's actually someone else's task and consciously decide to stop interfering just for today.
Or encouragement, replace one instance of praise or criticism with a simple expression of gratitude or an observation of effort. Just one small step. That's where the courage begins. The courage to be disliked, which is ultimately the courage to be free and potentially happy.